Well, hey everybody, welcome back to So You Want to Be in Ministry. I'm Tim, and we are all about educating you if you're thinking about jumping into ministry, equipping you if you're already in, encouraging you if you're in a tough season and you just feel like, I need to get out of here. We want to encourage you to maybe stay in if it's not your time to leave. And then if you're just listening because you want to follow God leaders, we want to empower you to follow godly leaders well. Today, we get to interview Chad Aukland. He is the representative of Injoy Stewardship Solutions. That's more of a tongue twister than I thought it would be. Injoy Stewardship. Oh man, I even did it the second time. Injoy Stewardship Solutions. You got to say it faster. That's what it is. But he actually worked with our church. We just did a building project. He helped us navigate, and his company helped us navigate the capital campaign. I think they did a really good job helping us navigate it. Coming out of COVID, let's just be clear with that. Like, we were coming out of being shut down, and there were times where I'm like, are we just dumb to do this? Like, are we dumb? It's panned out okay, and Chad did a great job of helping us navigate that time. I think if you're looking at maybe doing a capital campaign, if you're looking at maybe building a building, he is a great resource. I would definitely talk to him. But you are going to want to listen to this episode. And if you know somebody in ministry, whether it's not-for-profit or church ministry, that is thinking about building, I would highly encourage you to send this episode to them. That's not to get me like clicks or anything. It is just a helpful resource that I think you would want them to hear. So without further ado, here's Chad. Well, hey, Chad, so glad to have you on the podcast today. Looking forward to this conversation, dude.
Likewise, Tim. Good to see you again, and hope things are going well where you are.
They are going well. So we met because you helped us navigate our capital campaign headed towards the building. And so I am really excited to share the insights you gave to us with other people because I know they're going to benefit from it as well.
Very cool.
So tell us, you're with Injoy. You can obviously talk about Injoy and give us insight into what that is, but
Sure.
Could you tell us as you get to Injoy, like what's the bullet point version of how you even ended up with this company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a associate pastor. I was born and raised out on the West Coast, the Northwest specifically in Seattle, and lived out there almost 30 years. Was on staff as an associate pastor at a church out on the east side of Seattle for about 8 years. And my wife and I just felt this, hey, let's spread our wings. It was the church I was born into, so it's all we had ever known. And so it's like, hey, what else is out there? And we ended up going from everything we knew, everything we were comfortable with, to the complete polar opposite, moving from Seattle to Northeast Atlanta, and came down here to be an executive pastor at a church in this area, and was there about 3 years, and the pastor ended up resigning that we came to serve with. And so I've never been called, you are a special person, because I've never been called to be a lead pastor. I don't think I'll ever be called to be a lead pastor. It takes a special someone. And so Tammy and I had the opportunity through a guy that I'd worked with in Seattle who had come to be the vice president at Injoy, to get on board with Injoy. He had called me just before that pastor resigned. And so I made a quick phone call and said, hey, man, is that opportunity still available? And he said it is. And so in September of 2006, I jumped on board with Injoy, and the rest is history. This September, in just a few weeks, I'll celebrate 18 years with Injoy and being able to serve all kinds of churches. I still have my hand a little bit in vocational ministry, if you will. I help with some of the executive pastor duties at a local church, but very, very, very part-time. My full-time responsibilities lie as vice president of consulting with Injoy, and I love what I get to do, and never thought that I'd be in this role. Always thought that I'd be a pastor of some sort, but this is where God has me for this season, and I love it.
So talk to us a little bit about what Injoy does. Like, give us.
Yeah, man.
I know there's several arms to different companies that all work together. However you would describe it, like there's an overarching thing, and then you guys work together. What does the Injoy side of things do?
Yeah. So some of your listeners may be familiar with Dr. John Maxwell. I'm not going to give an exhaustive history, but I think it's important to make that connection because in some circles, he's a pretty big name still. And so he founded Injoy back in 1992 out of a real desire for us being a friend to pastors. He had gone through this process when he was at Skyline Wesleyan out in San Diego and just realized, man, this is just it's really collegiate. It's just, here's a 3-ring binder and a cloud of dust and you'll raise all the money you could possibly raise. And he's like, you know what? We got to be a friend to pastors. We got to be that Aaron and Hur holding up pastors' arms through this process. And so out of that passion, Injoy was birthed. And most recently, probably within the last 5 years, we've really become what you could call a one-stop shop for all things church stewardship and generosity. So our primary discipline has been and still is capital campaigns. And so helping churches, raise money for, like you guys, for a new building, for debt retirement, for expansion. We also help churches with their annual giving. Every church, if I were to ask a pastor, do you need more money for ministry, would be lying if they said no. And so we come alongside churches and help them with that. We have an arm that helps with personal finance and with planned estate giving. So we kind of run the gamut as it relates to church stewardship and generosity. My personal responsibility is leading our consulting team for the capital campaign side of our organization.
So on the capital campaign side, what are 2 or 3 questions that churches or pastors, senior leaders should be asking themselves before pursuing a capital campaign?
So I'll give you 4. I'll give you 3 plus an extra credit bonus.
Okay.
And so there's 4 areas we believe that every pastor, every church leader should consider before they ever even pick up the phone to call somebody to talk about this process. And number 1 is a vision, a clear, crisp, and compelling vision, not only for the church, but also for this project. How is the vision for whatever they're wanting to raise capital for going to help them accomplish the overall vision that God has called their church to achieve? So vision is number 1. Number 2, you got to have an urgent project. I mean, when we partnered with you guys, your project was pretty urgent. Like, you were out of space, you needed more space, and God dropped this opportunity in your lap, and the rest is history. But there needs to be an urgent project. And so vision is first, project is second. Number 3, and I think this probably is most important, they need to have a leadership team that's unified. Not only unified around the vision of the church and the vision of the project, but unified as co-laborers in this ministry together. Like, they enjoy when they get up and get to go to work or, rub shoulders and elbows with their coworkers. They actually like them. Like, that's pretty important. I've seen a lot of this process derailed because the leadership can't agree, or the leadership has personal agenda before what's best for ministry. So clear, crisp, and compelling vision, unified leadership, a urgent project, and then the last thing. You want me to go back and redo that?
No, I was gonna say that third one, just because it's so fresh for me. That is so true that you were unified. Like, I can think of, it was very stressful. Like, any project is stressful just because if you want it to be great, it adds to the stress because you want to be the best it can possibly be. Yeah. And there were moments where when we were coming together as a leadership team to make really critical decisions that I knew we were in it together. And there were moments where we were just like, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but this feels right. And then on the flip side, how we would celebrate together when we were like, oh yeah, it worked. Like, that was so awesome. So I didn't think of that one, but that is so true. That is a critical piece. Yeah.
So again, a strong, clear, crisp, compelling vision, an urgent project, a unified leadership. And then the 4th one is you need to have a trusting congregation. One of the things that we ask churches on the very front end, are there any areas within the congregation that might derail us from desired results? There's a small faction of people that 2 campaigns ago got mad because we used $30 for something different than what we said we were going to use it for. Could that trust fracture come up in this campaign and really derail us. And so,
Wow.
does your congregation trust you? So, clear, crisp, compelling vision, is that in place, both for the church and the project? Number two, you have a project that's urgent. It can't just be, man, we want to do this. It really needs to cross over into, we need to do this. And if we don't, what's the opportunity cost? And then the third one is that unified leadership. Man, we got to like doing ministry together and get along and agree. And then the fourth is, does our congregation trust us? And if those four things are in place, honestly, let's go. Let's take the hill.
So that fourth one is the extra credit.
That's extra credit.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that's free. Yeah.
That is a big bonus. So and I'll just speak to it since it's all fresh. That was a big deal for us too, that people did trust me and people did trust us, where as we were navigating early on, it's like, oh man, I trust you, but this is weird. And then when it landed, they were like, wow. And so we just had to keep going. So because you're going to have moments where it's just like, you got to get through the moment with trust. And then on the backside, if you did your due diligence, you're going to earn more trust because they were like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's unique. Your situation is unique. And a lot of pastors and church leaders are in the same situation you're in, where, we're getting ready to embark on a project where the central campus isn't really going to benefit from the giving. It's all going to be for this multi-site campus that needs expanded space to grow. And not only did your campus, which is the multi-site campus, respond incredibly well, but the central campus, the main campus, supported something that honestly, they may never darken the door of, but they believe so strongly in the vision of the church, and they support it at a deep, deep level.
To the point, I don't think you know this, but to the point that on our launch Sunday, that campus was wearing red. So their local high school is orange, but they all wore red to support our campus that day. Like it was a sea of red in the audience at a different camp. They couldn't even see us really. And they were just like, we're wearing red. Like, yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
It's so cool. So in that, maybe this plays along with this. What are some common mistakes people make in the capital campaign process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that unfortunately I don't get asked a lot, but there are some key mistakes. Number one, I would say they go too fast. I've never, ever had a church in 18 years of doing this that has said, man, my runway was too long. I've had a lot say, wow, that was fast and really felt forced. So step back, again, make sure that you're ready. Give yourself, if you feel like, hey, we got to go and see dollars coming in this fall, consider after the first of the year, because there's so much groundwork to be laid and process to be executed prior to seeing dollars coming in that you don't want to rush. And if you have that strong foundation, we all know it's kind of like building a house. If you have a strong set of footings and a strong foundation, it's a whole lot easier to build that house than, as scripture says, you build it on the sand. What happens? It just washes away. And so give yourself that strong foundation. I would say, secondly, whatever process you agree to, whatever process that you enter into, whether it's, let's say a church works with Injoy, or they work with somebody else, or they do this themselves, whatever the process is that you agree to and start to execute, don't modify that process as you're walking through this capital campaign. It for us, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the process works not because it's an Injoy derived process, but because it's a biblical process. And if it worked over 2,000 years ago and God honored that, why would he stop doing that today? And so be true to the process. And then I would say the last thing, and this is where most churches that try to do it themselves get tripped up. And that is, it becomes a fundraiser, not a spiritual journey. Yep. We're going to our people and saying, we need 100 people to give $1,000 each and we'll raise all the money we need. But what if somebody were to go through a spiritual journey, seeking the Lord as to what sacrifice means for them, hearing from him and obeying him, and they have the capacity to give $500,000, And that's what God lays on their heart, and that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But all you've asked for is $1,000. Well, they're going to take a $499,000 vacation. They're like, sweetheart, let's write the check tomorrow. This is fantastic. So err on the side of spiritual journey and relying on God to reveal what that sacrifice looks like versus, hey, let's just run into this headlong as a fundraiser and sell bricks and sell shingles and, ask our people to give a certain amount and not focus on the spiritual journey side.
Yeah, on the process. So let's jump into that, a good step-by-step process, because when we navigate, we are very unique in another way in that we set up our process and smack dab in the middle of it, we had a baton handoff to our next senior pastor. So we actually switched senior pastors.
Yep.
Right in the middle of this, but the process did not change. It was, we stayed true to the process that we had set up from the very beginning. So talk about that process. How would you roll out the process? What would be a step-by-step that you would encourage people to take?
Yeah, I'll just kind of rely on the process that we utilize.
Yep.
It's a 4-step process, and it starts with what we just call vision clarification. Vision clarity is very different from vision messaging. And so the first thing we've got to do is to define a clear, like I said earlier, crisp and compelling vision for why somebody would want to be a part of this project. Most people, Tim, in church don't care as much about the what as they care about the why. Like you guys are building a new building for your multi-site campus. Well, that's fantastic. But if I'm in your ministry, what I want to know is, okay, what is this resource going to help us be more effective at doing in, around, and outside of our community? And so clarifying that vision, getting to a place where we're comfortable communicating that, our staff is all singing and our leaders are all singing off that same sheet of music. So number one, you got to clarify the vision. Number two is kind of what we call leadership development. There's going to be different aspects of a campaign, whether that's, creating print and video and social media and web collateral or, a myriad of other disciplines. You might need some teams and to develop the leaders of those teams to execute effectively their responsibilities. So this is really where kind of the rubber meets the road. We get into the trenches and we're training the teams. And then the third phase for us is once you've clarified the vision, you've developed the leaders, we're ready to execute, we go public. This is where most churches think a capital campaign lies. Like they don't do the 4 to 6 month process leading up to you as pastor standing up on your stage and saying, we need money. So a lot of churches forego that 4 to 6 months and they just stand up in front of their people and say, we need a building. This is what we're doing. We need you to give sacrificially to it. And what they're going to do is give out of their availability. They won't give sacrificially because it's not a compelling why. But that going public phase is usually about 3 to 5 weeks. And then once people make their commitments, we go into what I feel is the most important phase of any initiative. And that's what we call follow through. Some people call it follow up. Some people call it fulfillment. But we call it follow through. And this is the giving period. This is where we keep the vision fresh and alive in front of our people. This is where we assimilate new people into the process. I mean, I know for you guys at Metro, you saw a tremendous amount of new involvement in follow through because, again, you were true to the process and you kept this vision fresh and alive in front of your people at both campuses. And so as I've gone over some of the data with your team, the increase in participation has been pretty exponential. So vision clarification, leadership development, going public, and follow through. That is for us, our step-by-step process.
Okay. Have you noticed, so in the engagement within this process from the congregation, from the audience, from the church people, have you noticed a difference in how older generations would give versus younger generations? Or maybe there's even other dynamics, how people would give, different social classes, whatever, but have you noticed any difference in that?
Huge. This question, Tim, I could go for an hour.
Okay.
Because, and I won't, so don't worry, but this is probably the the one thing that we're facing right now more than anything. And we're just calling it a transfer of giving demographic.
Okay.
So we had heard for years that the transfer of wealth from baby boomers to baby busters was going to be the largest transfer of wealth in the history of our country. Not true.
Mhm.
What we're experiencing right now from the busters to the Gen X and younger is the largest transfer of wealth we've ever experienced. But the fact still remains when we talk about those boomers and busters, they are what we call the duty generation. They give to the church, whether it's regular giving, over and above giving, simply because it's the right thing to do. The Bible says it, therefore we're going to do it, and that's never going to change. They're just the duty generation. And listen, the church has benefited tremendously from that mentality. But what we're seeing now with the giving demographic changing so dramatically is Gen X and younger come more with a prove it mentality. And that prove it is prove to me why I should be compelled to give to your church more than I give to something like the Humane Society. Because, or the ASPCA. If I hear Sarah McLachlan sing Arms of an Angel one more time, I'm going to be broke. Because my little girl, all she wants to do is save all those animals.
Yeah.
What about the church's mission and vision is more compelling than that? So these new demographics have funds beyond our belief, but we have to do a much better job at what I talked about earlier, convincing them with a compelling why that they should, and here's how I say it, they should treat the church, giving to the church, like the trumpet solo in the orchestra of giving opportunities that they face every day. Okay. I mean, my wife and I gave, just an aside, back when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, we gave $10 through text to the Red Cross. To this day, I still get communication from Red Cross in the mail and on my phone to give to their compelling organization. Why would the church be any less profuse, if you will, in sharing their mission and vision? Because we believe the church should be the most well-run, best-funded organization in any community. Yeah. So we're seeing a huge transfer of not only wealth, but giving demographic. And as such, it's no longer good enough just to say it's because the Bible says so. That's important. Yeah. That has to be an element of it. But in addition to that, okay, what's compelling beyond the color that we're going to paint the bathrooms about the vision of your church?
Yeah. So when you go about, so let's go to the biblical side then.
Yeah.
What passages do you tend to go to support a capital campaign? Because I think church leaders, and maybe even church people, I think we understand the tithing side of it. Most of us can come out of seminary or Bible college and kind of defend that through scripture. Sure. But capital campaign is something different. It's more on the offering side. And so what scripture passages do you go to help a pastor really go, yeah, there's a biblical foundation for this as well?
Yeah, there is a biblical blueprint, which I'll go through briefly in just a second. But, there's places in, Acts 2 in the early church that we could, go to as far as, them unifying together and giving sacrificially and providing for those who had need. We can go back to the book of Exodus, where they're building the tabernacle and the sacrificial giving that took place there. When it comes to, taking the first step, Joshua chapters 1-3, where they're standing at the banks of the Jordan River and it's at flood stage, and God simply says, put your toe in the water, like take that step of obedience. And then what does God do? He backs the waters up. And so, but for us, where our biblical blueprint lies is 1 Chronicles 28 and 29. Okay. And so again, very briefly, this is where, David was given the vision for the building of the temple much earlier in 1 Chronicles. It was confirmed to him by the prophet Nathan in 1 Chronicles 17. And then 1 Chronicles 28, he stood up in front of his leaders first. That's really important that we engage our leaders first. And he simply said, I had it in my heart to build a temple that would house the Ark of the Covenant of our Lord and for its footstool. So he began to cast vision to his leaders first. And pastor, church leader, that's paramount of importance. You've got to get your leaders engaged first if you want your congregation or the rest of the crowd to be engaged at any level. But then God did something significant. God intersected David's journey with his son Solomon, because David was a man of war, had blood on his hands, couldn't lend a hand to the building of the temple. God said, Solomon, you're going to build the temple. And instead of David throwing a fit and saying, how in the world is he going to do it? He simply said, be strong and courageous and do the work. And then he laid out for Solomon the entire process. But when we get to 1 Chronicles 29, we follow this model: leader, leaders, crowd. He cast the vision to the leaders. Obviously, it was confirmed in the leader first. Then he cast vision to the leaders. Then the crowd came on board. In the same way, in 1 Chronicles 29, when it goes through what they gave, David gave first, then the leaders gave, and it really exhaustively shares everything they gave. It shares, though, a few things of what the crowd gave, but it says this: and the crowd gave willingly because of the generous response of their leaders. Speed of the leaders, speed of the team. That's still true today. But here's what's most significant. When we look at 1 Chronicles 29, verses 14 and following, David, after they were able to give, after they fully funded the vision, he sits by himself and he prays to God, and he simply says this: who am I and who are my people that we could consecrate ourselves to the Lord in this way? They looked at what they had just done as an opportunity to worship God at a deeper level. And so that biblical blueprint is so important, because the perspective for moving into an initiative like this has to be, this is an extension of our worship and our obedience to the one true God. And so we feel like that's our biblical blueprint. When we walk through those 4 steps that I outlined earlier, it follows that model exactly. And why does it work? Because it's a biblical process.
So in walking through this process and layering this out as a leader, how do you come alongside to help a pastor, church leadership do this well? Because, I guess I'm speaking just from the knowledge that I have, but I would say that most church leaders, most pastors are probably abysmal at this. So how do you come along to support and make sure that it's being done well?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, and this isn't any sort of a criticism on pastors or churches or anything like that. But, if anybody's gone through seminary, they know that the one thing they don't talk about is money.
They don't.
They don't teach you budgeting. They don't teach you capital campaigns. They don't teach you any aspect of church stewardship or generosity. They don't. And so most pastors, whether they're the lead pastor, executive pastor, associate pastor, they are, for lack of a better term, clueless when it comes to this process. So when we come alongside a church, we never assume anything. Okay. We always come into the process with the mindset of, okay, we're starting from scratch. My first meeting with a church is with the pastor. And so I'm going to sit with that pastor for about 90 to 120 minutes. And I'm just going to pepper that pastor with questions. I'm going to learn their personal history, their ministry history, their experience with something like this. And I do encounter, Tim, some churches that the pastor's done 7 of these, and he just loves to have the confidence of someone locking arms with them. And I come along churches, they're like, I'll be in Austin, Texas on Monday with a young pastor. He's scared to death about doing this. And so we're going to lock arms and walk every step of the way very intentionally. But we do 2 tracks in our process. We have a pastoral track, and then we have a congregational track. Okay. And so I walk with a pastor alongside that pastor, making sure that we're putting that pastor in front of the right people at the right time with the proper messaging. You go back to talking about the demographics earlier. It's important that the message doesn't change, but how we message it connects with whatever demographic we're communicating with. How you communicate your building project with a group of 20 somethings is very different than how you're going to communicate it and engage in a group of 60 somethings. The message doesn't change, like the gospel. The gospel doesn't change, but how we've communicated it has changed vastly over time. And at the same time, we're working with the pastor. We come alongside the auxiliary team, and we're engaging the congregation in this process as well, getting them bought in at the leadership level first, and then the crowd, as we talked about in 1 Chronicles 28 and 29.
I'll even speak to the pastor that you just referenced. So walking through this, I wasn't even technically in charge of anything, and I was scared in this project.
Sure.
Like the most I had ever done was, and it did help me. I appreciate the previous pastor that set me up in this way to learn. But I had a youth center project where I was turning 6 Sunday school rooms into 1 youth center, and I had a budget of like $25,000. And now I was overseeing a project of multi-millions, and I was very, very nervous. And I would say this, being nervous and concerned and like, man, I hope we do this well, that's a good place to be. It means that you're
100%.
It's an attitude that says you're taking it seriously, you're contacting the right people, you're navigating it well. And so I would even say that as an encouragement. If you're freaking out as a pastor a little bit, that's not a bad place to be. Just find the right people to help you navigate it. Enjoy.
Well, to that point, and this hasn't happened very often, but it has happened on occasion where I'll walk into a ministry and we got this. We hired you because we were told we had to. Yeah. And okay, we can work with that, but I'm with you completely that if you're nervous, if you're a little bit scared, if you're not sure what to do, man, that's a great place to be, because I feel like that's where God can work the best.
Yeah. And I think people feed off that where they're like, okay, well, he's not like being arrogant. Like
100%.
They're trying to figure this out. And we all, like, if you've done the urgency and you've done that it's a need and you've casted the why and everything, people will naturally just go, we need it. So we don't know what to do either. So, but we need it.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right.
All right. How do you help churches navigate the collection of the funds while allowing the committers of those funds to remain anonymous? Because that's a tension, definitely.
It is a tension, but what I tell churches, because I just got asked this from a church in Johnson City, Tennessee last week. Yeah. They said, hey, how do we handle commitments? We know how we handle our regular giving. How do we handle commitments? So my answer is going to be a little shorter on this.
Okay.
However you handle regular giving is how you should handle your commitments.
Okay.
So for instance, whomever knows who gives what in the regular giving side should be the same people who know who gives or who commits and gives what on the campaign side.
Okay.
And how you enter that into your system should be the same way as you do it for your regular giving. Most church management systems, not all, but most church management systems have a pledge tracking or a commitment tracking module. So they're already set up because they know this is going to be a part of the life of the ministry to receive those commitments. And so however you're currently doing that, that's how you should do it moving forward with commitments and receiving the dollars.
All right. Switching gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
I always ask this question. You got pastoral history, so you would definitely understand that these seasons happen, but there's definitely going to be some pastors out there that are discouraged. Maybe they're in the midst of a project, maybe they're not, but they're going to be in some discouraging seasons where they're just navigating some tough stuff. What encouragement would you have for them?
Yeah. Breathe. Breathe. I'm dead serious. Yeah. Like, nothing has ever occurred to God. Your price increase, your mid-course correction on project, the youth pastor that decided to leave and not leave well during the project, God knew all of that was going to happen. Take a step back and breathe and remember, and again, it's easy for me to say this because I'm sitting here in my house in Atlanta. God is still on the throne. Yeah. The economy doesn't scare him. Inflation doesn't scare him. Construction prices being ridiculous right now doesn't scare him. Our owner, Joe Sangle, says it this way, and it's a cliche, and some people are going to want to not like this, but he says, if it's God's will, it's God's bill.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we have to be foolish and put blinders on and let God just deal with it. Like, we still have to be obedient and prudent and act with faith moving into this. But I would say, number one, just breathe. Number two, if you're on the front end of this process and it's more than just, say, a debt retirement initiative, but you're actually going to have to spend money to build a building, expand a building, renovate a building, whatever it is, don't just go with your best friend. Don't just go with the person you're most comfortable with. Get multiple quotes. And I'm not going to say 3 or 7 or 8, whatever. Get multiple quotes so that your people know that you've done the due diligence to steward most appropriately the resources that God has entrusted to your church. And I would say just a word of caution.
Okay.
Be very careful when you're subbing out the work to give that work to people in your church.
Yeah.
Okay. I personally, if I was a lead pastor, which again I said I would never be, but if I were a lead pastor, I would rather maintain the relationship than make money off of that person.
Yeah.
And I have seen more often than not, when they enter into a business relationship, it goes sideways to the point of members suing the church. Yeah. And it's just ugly. So multiple quotes, and be careful with who you work with. And then the last one I would say is this: don't overestimate your people's expectations. Your people want just simply to see your church moving forward. You may have this grand plan to build this massive master plan that costs you $20 million. And all you can do in this first phase is raise $3 million and build a shell and an auditorium for the people to worship in. Believe it or not, your people, for the most part, are going to be okay with a phased project because you're moving forward, and most importantly, you're not sacrificing the ministry on the altar of a project. And you're not overextending your ministry financially to the point where this project becomes somewhat of a millstone around your neck because you can't afford to do ministry because all you got to do is pay for this project. Yeah. So don't overestimate your people's expectations. All they want to see is that you're moving forward. And then I would finish with this. Pastor, church leader, like David said to Solomon, be courageous and do the work. Don't let something that is contrived by the world distract you from what God has called you to accomplish in your ministry. Be courageous, and it's going to take courage. It's going to take faith, and do the work and trust that God is, as he always has, going to hold up his end of the bargain.
Absolutely, man. That's some good wisdom there. I appreciate good encouragement too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Well, man, that's all I got for you. Anything else you need to add?
I would just say, and again, I don't want to use this, Tim, as a plug for our ministry, but
I want you to, so please tell us all the things.
Yeah. So, hey, if we would love to just have a conversation, there's no obligation. And I will tell you, having done this as long as I have, there's some ministries that we're not a fit with, and that's totally understandable. But enjoystewardship.com is our website. You can get all the information there that you need. If you want to connect with me personally, I am on the socials at Injoy Chad, and my email is chada@enjoystewardship.com. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you've got questions, if you want to talk. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and see where God might take the partnership. But Tim, man, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to connect with you again, and to share some insight that hopefully will help the pastors and church leaders that watch this.
Yeah, I would say call them. The worst that happens is you have a conversation and it's just not a good fit. The best thing that happens is you navigate a very difficult thing that we're not often taught, and you do it well as a result of that conversation. And I would say that obviously the partnership went very well for us. you're on my podcast. If it didn't
There you go.
I wouldn't have
There you
had
go.
you. So,
We still like each other. That's
we still
awesome.
like each other. Yeah. To the point that I
love
want
it.
you to tell other people. So please check
That's
it
good,
out.
man.
It's worth the conversation. Everybody go check out Injoy, especially if you're having conversations about possible capital campaigns.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yep, no problem, Chad. It's so great to have you. Look forward to what God's going to keep doing with you. Thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I think you can see that tons of information, but so helpful just to have a process to think through when you're walking through a building project, just having some sort of anchor to hold on to go, this is how I would navigate it. If you like what you heard, please reach out to Chad at Injoy. It's INJOY. Geesh, I cannot speak today. INJOY. They would love to talk to you. I found them incredibly helpful and comforting through the whole process. And I was kind of leading the charge on the building side, so I felt supported. Obviously, having him on the episode today should acknowledge that. But make sure you check that out. Thank you so much for engaging, liking, subscribing, sharing with other people. We are so grateful here at So You Want to Be in Ministry that you would be willing to do that. And we'll see you next time.